8 years have gone by since the night everything in my life unraveled. It was the night my husband Tom discovered my affair with my boss David. It hadn't been a coincidence. Tom's suspicions had grown for months. The late nights at work, sudden business trips, and the growing distance between us had all painted a picture he could no longer ignore. Still, nothing could have prepared me for the pain and disbelief in his eyes when he finally confronted me with the truth. The affair wasn't some grand love story. It was a series of reckless choices made during a difficult time in our marriage. I had worked at that company for 5 years. David was confident, charming, and seemed to understand my frustrations at home in ways Tom didn't. What began as harmless venting soon crossed boundaries I never thought I would break. I knew it was wrong, but the secrecy carried a dangerous thrill I mistook for excitement. I told myself it was harmless, but I was wrong. That night, Tom found the emails, undeniable proof of what I had done. There was no point in lying. The fury, the heartbreak, the shock on his face said it all. Without a word, he left the house and didn't return for 2 long days. Those were the longest hours of my life, spent in silence and regret. When he finally came back, it was only to gather his things. This time, he left for good. The months that followed were a blur. I took a leave of absence from work because I couldn't face David or anyone else in that office. Pretending life was normal was impossible. Tom filed for divorce soon after, and I didn't fight it. I had destroyed our marriage, and there was no way to undo the damage. I moved into a small apartment across town, a quiet place where no one knew me, and for the first time I found comfort in anonymity. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. We had no children, which made the process easier on paper but no less painful in reality. Our families had been close for years, so the fallout spread far beyond just the 2 of us. Friends took sides. Others simply drifted away. The loneliness was crushing, but I knew I had no one to blame but myself. Eventually, I returned to work, though not at David's company. I couldn't stand the stares, the whispered gossip, or the pitying glances. I resigned and joined a smaller firm where no one knew my story. It was supposed to be a clean slate, but guilt doesn't vanish with a change of scenery. I buried myself in work, trying to fill the void, but deep down I knew I had lost everything that truly mattered. Over the next few years, I began trying to rebuild. I started therapy to understand why I had made such self-destructive choices, why I had gambled my marriage for something so meaningless. The sessions forced me to face hard truths. The affair had been only a symptom. The real problem was my silence. I hadn't communicated, hadn't worked with Tom to heal what was broken. Instead, I had sought validation in all the wrong places. Meanwhile, Tom moved on. Through mutual friends, I learned he started dating again about a year after our divorce. Eventually, he met someone serious, Emily. She was kind, grounded, and everything I wasn't. They seemed genuinely happy together, and oddly enough, I felt some relief knowing he had found peace. The peace I had taken from him. 3 years after the divorce, I saw Tom again at a mutual friend's wedding. It was the first time we had been face-to-face since the night everything fell apart. We exchanged polite greetings, but between us stood a silence heavier than words, a distance that could never be bridged. When I looked into Tom's eyes that day, I could still see traces of the old pain lingering there. It hit me harder than I expected. The guilt I thought I had buried came rushing back all over again. I didn't know if he would ever truly forgive me, or if I could ever forgive myself. As the years went on, I continued therapy and focused on rebuilding the pieces of my life. I joined a support group for people who had experienced infidelity, not just those who'd been betrayed, but also those who had been the betrayers. Listening to their stories was humbling. It opened my eyes to the lasting damage infidelity causes on both sides. I began to understand that my choices hadn't only hurt Tom, they had wounded me too. I had lost sight of my self-worth and the kind of person I wanted to be. Facing that truth was painful, but it was necessary. By the 5th year after our divorce, I finally reached a point where peace no longer felt impossible. With the encouragement of a friend from my new job, I started a small business, something I had dreamed about for years but never had the courage to attempt. For the first time in a long while, I was creating something meaningful again. It didn't erase the past or replace the life I had destroyed, but it marked a new beginning, and that meant something. Around that time, I heard that Tom had gotten engaged to Emily. When I saw their engagement photos online, my emotions were complicated. A part of me was genuinely happy for him. He had found the kind of happiness and love he truly deserved. But another part of me couldn't help feeling the weight of what I had thrown away. I couldn't stop thinking about the life that might have been if only I had been stronger, more honest, and far less selfish. 8 years have now passed since that terrible night. Tom and Emily are married and recently welcomed their first child. When I heard the news, I mailed them a card. Just a simple note congratulating them and wishing them joy. I didn't expect to hear anything back, but a few weeks later, Tom reached out. He thanked me for the card and asked if I'd like to meet for coffee. He said there were things he wanted to talk about, not to reopen old wounds, but to find closure. When we met, it was like seeing a familiar face from another lifetime. There was warmth in our conversation, but also a quiet distance, the kind that comes from shared history and irreversible choices. We talked about how our lives had changed, about the people we had become. Tom admitted that while my betrayal had devastated him, he had eventually realized that the cracks in our marriage had been forming long before the affair. He confessed he had regrets too, not being as attentive, not noticing when I was struggling, not trying harder to bridge the growing gap between us. His words didn't excuse what I had done, but they helped me see that he no longer saw me as a villain, just a flawed human being who had made terrible mistakes. He told me he had forgiven me, not for my sake, but for his own peace of mind. It had taken him years, he said, but he'd learned that holding on to anger only kept him from embracing the life he now had. A life filled with love, family, and stability. When we said goodbye, there was no dramatic moment or rekindling of lost love. Instead, there was a quiet understanding, an acceptance that our story had ended long ago, and both of us had grown from the pain. Today, I still run that same business, which has grown far beyond what I ever expected. I've started dating again, but with a newfound sense of awareness. I know now what truly matters. Not fleeting excitement or secrecy, but the steady, honest effort of building something real. My affair remains the greatest mistake of my life, but it also became my harshest teacher. It forced me to confront myself, to change, to take responsibility. I'm no longer the same woman I was 8 years ago, and for that I'm thankful. I've learned to be honest, to face my flaws, and to strive toward a better version of myself. The past can't be rewritten, and the weight of my choices will always be a part of me. But over time, that weight has grown lighter. I've come to understand that while I lost my marriage, I gained something equally profound: myself. And sometimes that kind of discovery is the hardest yet most valuable one of all.